When you hear the phrase made in China, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably clothes, toys, maybe even the phone you're holding right now. For decades, that's what it meant. China was the world's factory for cheap stuff. But that whole idea, it's becoming outdated and really, really fast. So let's dive into how China is pulling off this massive pivot to become the world's new electric superpower.
First up, a quick question for you. When you think about the electric vehicle revolution, which company do you think is leading the charge? Most of us would probably say Tesla, right? I mean, it's America's most valuable car company. Well, the answer might actually surprise you.
Meet BYD. It stands for Build Your Dreams. This Chinese company didn't just beat out Volkswagen to become the biggest car maker in China. It has also blown past Tesla to become the world's #1 seller of electric vehicles. And this is not just some fluke. No way. It's a sign of a much, much bigger story unfolding.
So let's get into it. Section 1, China's New Dream. We're going to explore how BYD isn't just about cars. It's a symbol of a whole new grand strategy for the country, one that's shifting its entire economic model.
That's because BYD is the perfect poster child for this new plan, a plan that's moving away from what made China rich in the first place. At the core of this new strategy is something we can call the new QE. And no, I'm not talking about the money printing kind of QE. I'm talking about quality and electricity. See, after a decade-long detour into a super risky debt-fueled property boom, China is pivoting back to its roots, manufacturing. But this time, it's all about high-tech, green, and electric.
Okay, on to Section 2, the first plan. To really understand where China is going, we first have to look at its original game plan, becoming the world's factory.
After the death of Mao, China's leaders made this historic shift. Starting with Deng Xiaoping back in 1978, guys like Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao all put one thing above everything else: economic development over communist ideology. And that single decision set the stage for the most rapid reduction of poverty in all of human history.
And the results, they really do speak for themselves. In 1978, China was barely a blip on the radar, accounting for less than 1% of global exports. By 2020, that number had absolutely exploded to over 12%. This incredible growth wasn't an accident. It was a very carefully executed plan.
So what was the secret sauce? How did they pull it off? Well, they started by boosting productivity on farms, letting families take over again. Then they aggressively courted foreign investment, soaking up new technologies and know-how. They fueled their factories with super cheap loans and subsidized electricity, all paid for by the savings of the Chinese people. And for local officials, the ticket to a promotion was simple: make sure your exports go up.
It was an absolute winning formula. It lifted 800 million people out of poverty. So why on earth would you change course? Well, the world changed. And in 2008, a global crisis forced China to take a major, major detour.
And that brings us to Section 3, the second plan. This wasn't really a proactive strategy, but more of a panicked reaction that kicked off a massive, and I mean massive, debt boom.
To keep its economy from crashing after the 2008 financial crisis, China unleashed an era of investment, speculation, and just so much debt. It all started with this number: $580 billion. That was the size of the stimulus package Beijing used to flood the economy with easy money, which basically doubled bank lending overnight and kicked off a frenzy of construction.
And that debt just took off like a rocket. Local governments, using these kind of shady, off-the-books financing vehicles, borrowed astronomical sums of money, now estimated to be around $8 trillion. This money funded everything from high-speed rail to party members' pet projects and, of course, a ton of housing.
This whole addiction to debt got concentrated in one area: property. Nearly 40% of all bank loans in the country were tied to real estate. Housing became less about a place to live and more about a tool for speculation, with tens of millions of apartments just sitting empty. The bubble was getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And this leads us right here to Section 4, the third plan. With that property bubble now collapsing, Beijing was forced to engineer a brand new strategy: a massive, all-in bet on an electric future.
Right now, the government is trying to break the country's addiction to debt. And they would love, absolutely love, for their own citizens to just spend their way out of this mess. But there's a huge problem. Chinese households just don't consume that much. Their spending is only 37% of GDP, far below the world average. For decades, the Chinese have been world-class producers, but pretty reluctant consumers.
So why is that? Well, consumer confidence is at an all-time low.
The social safety net is weak, so people save for a rainy day. A huge chunk of their wealth is now trapped in that falling property market. And on top of all that, the population is now shrinking and getting older fast. So with weak demand at home, China has to look outward once again.
So what's the new plan? Go back to what you know best, making things. But not just any things. They're targeting the industries of the future. Let's just look at the numbers. China now produces somewhere between 50% and 60% of the entire world's electric vehicles.
And it's not just the cars. In the all-important battery sector, the things that power everything from cars to our phones, China's global share is around 60%. They've essentially perfected the entire lithium battery supply line.
And then there are solar panels. As a cornerstone of the whole green energy transition, China's share of global production is a staggering 90%. They are building a near monopoly on the key technologies of the 21st century.
And now for our final section, a world of consequences. This strategic pivot isn't just a domestic issue for China. It has enormous, and I mean enormous consequences for the rest of the world.
China is not just aiming to satisfy its own needs, it's building for global domination in these key sectors. And here's the catch. They have massive overcapacity. They have enough car factories to supply all of China, Europe, and America combined. They have 4 times more battery supply than they need. This means one thing is absolutely inevitable. A massive new wave of high-tech Chinese exports is coming for all of us.
And the West is already pushing back hard. The EU has launched investigations into EV subsidies, and American politicians are threatening huge tariffs. The entire era of free and easy trade with China is being seriously questioned, and it's setting the stage for some major trade conflicts.
But, decoupling isn't so simple. China is playing a smarter game now. Instead of just exporting finished goods, they're exporting the crucial components, like batteries and silicon wafers, to countries like Vietnam and Mexico. Those countries then do the final assembly and ship the products to the US. It's kind of like a scenic route for trade that makes China an indispensable part of the global supply chain.
All of this leaves us with a critical question for the future. For the last 100 years or so, geopolitical power was built on controlling oil. As the world electrifies, will the next 100 years be defined by who controls the supply of batteries, solar panels, and EVs? China is betting its entire future that the answer is yes.